He thought success meant staying invisible. But one choice changed everything. A quiet decision behind office doors that led to the most unexpected connection of his life. This is the story of what it really means to be seen. Tyler had always believed that hard work would be enough. For 3 years, he'd given everything to Ironclad Technologies, his time, his energy, his weekends, even his health. In return, he expected a fair chance at advancement. But each promotion he aimed for had quietly slipped through his fingers, handed instead to someone else with smoother charm, stronger connections, or a better grasp of office politics. It started as a dull ache, an awareness that something was off. The first time he was passed over, he told himself it was timing. The second time, he blamed himself for not doing enough. By the third, the bitterness had set in. It wasn't just about qualifications anymore. It was about the game behind the scenes. A game Tyler didn't know how to play. Despite it all, he kept showing up. Early mornings, late nights, every spreadsheet double-checked, every client followed up with care. But the recognition he hoped for never came. Promotions went to those who stayed visible in the right circles, who lingered at happy hours or flattered the right executives. Tyler had never been one to flatter. He believed in results, in ethics, in staying true to himself. Ironclad's office sat high above the city, all glass and steel, a shining monument to ambition. From the outside, it looked like a place where merit ruled. But inside, Tyler had come to realize merit was just one part of a much more complicated equation. He worked under Gregory Alton, the company's vice president. Gregory was a man of presence, impeccably dressed, silver at the temples, and known for his strategic brilliance. He commanded a room without speaking and rarely wasted time on small talk. People respected him, sometimes feared him, and almost never understood him. Tyler had always admired his discipline, even if Gregory remained a distant, enigmatic figure. But recently, something had shifted. Gregory had started to notice him, or at least it felt that way. There were moments in meetings when their eyes met and lingered too long. Comments that seemed more personal than necessary. A tone that felt laced with something unspoken. Tyler tried to ignore it, brushing it off as his imagination. But it kept happening. The air around Gregory seemed to grow warmer, heavier, whenever they were alone. And then came the internal announcement. The senior director of client strategy was stepping down, leaving a high-profile vacancy. It was the kind of role that came with prestige, influence, and a direct line to the C-suite. Tyler knew this was his chance. Determined not to let it slip away, he threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. Every project became a proving ground. Every report a demonstration of capability. He stayed later than ever, volunteered for extra tasks, and kept pushing long after others had gone home. His apartment felt more like a hotel room now, someplace to sleep for a few hours before returning to battle. But it wasn't just about output anymore. He began to study the people around him, how they moved, how they positioned themselves, how they built invisible networks of influence. He wasn't naturally gifted in that area, but he was observant, and slowly he began to adapt. It was during this time that Gregory's presence became more frequent, not in any obvious way, but Tyler started to feel watched. Not with scrutiny, but with intent. Sometimes he would sense Gregory standing just behind him in the office kitchen, saying nothing. Other times it was the way he lingered a moment too long after a meeting, as if wanting to say more, but choosing silence. One Monday morning, Tyler arrived to find a calendar invite waiting in his inbox. No subject line, just a short message, 8:30 a.m. My office. Sent by Gregory. The timing, the simplicity, it all felt significant. Tyler stared at the screen for a long moment before closing his laptop. His pulse had quickened, though he wasn't sure why. This could be it, the moment he'd been working toward for years. But something about it felt different. Not wrong, just loaded with weight. That evening, he didn't sleep much. He pressed his shirts twice, reviewed his recent project milestones, and rehearsed a quiet confidence in front of the mirror. He wasn't sure what Gregory was going to say, but he would be ready. He had to be. By morning, he arrived early, walking past the reflective glass walls like a soldier reporting for duty. As he reached Gregory's door, he paused, straightened his tie, and knocked softly. No answer. Then the door opened with a quiet creak, revealing Gregory already inside, standing with his back to the window, hands clasped behind him. The city behind him looked sharp and distant through the glass, like a world Tyler still wasn't sure he belonged in. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. Whatever happened next, he knew, would change everything. The silence in Gregory's office stretched long enough to become a presence in itself. Tyler stood just inside the doorway, waiting for instruction, uncertain whether to sit or remain standing. Gregory didn't move. His silhouette against the towering windows remained still, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the skyline. It was a posture of contemplation or perhaps calculation. Eventually, Gregory turned. The look on his face was unreadable, controlled, composed. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. Tyler sat, careful to maintain a neutral expression, masking the swirl of anticipation tightening in his chest. What followed wasn't a promotion offer, at least not in the traditional sense. Gregory spoke in measured tones, weaving a narrative about leadership, potential, and the future of Ironclad. He spoke of transitions, of needing someone trustworthy, discreet, and unshakably loyal in a rapidly evolving corporate landscape. Tyler listened carefully, noting the emphasis on personal integrity, on discretion, not skills listed on resumes, but qualities that couldn't be faked. There was no mention of the open position, no congratulations, no formal title offered, but the implication hung in the air like a blade suspended by thread. And then Gregory said something that lingered in Tyler's mind long after the meeting ended. Some doors don't open through hard work, he said. Sometimes they require a key you don't know you're holding. Tyler left the office unsettled, not because anything inappropriate had happened. Nothing had. But the tone, the subtle layering of meaning, had made it clear this was not simply about performance. Gregory's attention wasn't professional alone. There was interest in him, unspoken yet unmistakable. For days afterward, Tyler replayed the conversation, dissecting every word. He told himself to focus on the opportunity, not the undertones. After all, wasn't this what he wanted? A path forward, a chance to finally ascend beyond the glass ceiling that had held him down for so long. But ambition wasn't the only thing stirring inside him. There was something else, something deeper, something he had spent years trying to ignore. Tyler had never openly discussed his sexuality at work. He kept his personal life cleanly separated, never giving colleagues a glimpse into that side of his world. It had always seemed safer that way. The tech world was progressive on the surface, but whispers traveled fast, and subtle biases often carried more weight than outright prejudice. And yet, he couldn't deny the flicker he'd felt in Gregory's presence. Not desire, exactly. Not yet, but recognition. Like a mirror held up to parts of himself he'd kept hidden. If Gregory saw something in him, it wasn't just talent. It was something more personal, more vulnerable. He began to notice the shift in others' behavior. People watched him differently, as though they sensed a change in his proximity to power. Meetings ended with more lingering handshakes. Emails came with softened language, suggestions rather than instructions. Tyler had become visible in ways he hadn't before, and it unsettled him. One evening, after a late strategy session, Tyler found himself alone in the elevator with Gregory. The building was nearly empty, the hum of the city outside muffled by glass and steel. Gregory stood beside him, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed ahead. Neither of them spoke, but in that silence, something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what had been left unsaid in the office. Not a confession, not an invitation, just an understanding. As the doors opened on Gregory's floor, he stepped out, paused, and glanced back. "You've been doing excellent work," he said. "Keep showing me who you are." The words were neutral, but the way he said them felt anything but. That night, Tyler didn't sleep. His mind spiraled between ambition and instinct, between the future he had long fought for and the vulnerability he feared exposing. He didn't know if Gregory's attention was part of a test, a trap, or was something more complicated. But he knew that nothing in his life was going to remain the same. By morning, he had made a decision. He would play the game, but on his own terms. He would not allow himself to be defined by anyone else's expectations about his career, his identity, or his limits. He had earned this place, this attention, and perhaps even this moment of confusion. The next time he saw Gregory, it would not be as a hopeful subordinate waiting for validation. It would be as someone who had finally claimed his place at the table. Tyler's shift in demeanor didn't go unnoticed. He walked through the ironclad offices no longer as the eager strategist clawing his way upward, but as a man who had glimpsed the blueprint of power and wasn't afraid to follow it. He dressed a little sharper, spoke with more weight, and asked fewer questions. Confidence, even when quietly worn, changed how others engaged with him. Gregory kept his distance, at least publicly. Their interactions became brief, often limited to passing acknowledgments in meetings or strategic updates behind closed doors. Yet the intensity of their last conversation and the silence that followed echoed louder than words could. Tyler immersed himself in work, producing deliverables ahead of schedule, anticipating problems before they arose. Each success seemed to ripple upward, feeding the growing narrative that he was ready for more. But with each new win, the lines between performance and personal connection blurred. He began noticing patterns. Gregory would assign him projects that required late hours. Tyler often found himself alone in the building, always a floor away from the CEO's office. Occasionally, a brief message would come through. Still in the building? I want to run something by you quickly. Harmless on the surface. But the timing, the tone, suggested something else entirely. One Friday night, long after the office had emptied, Tyler stayed late to finalize a pitch for Monday's board preview. The floor was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of servers and the occasional buzz of an overhead light. He wasn't surprised when Gregory appeared in the doorway. Gregory didn't come inside right away. He stood in the threshold, arms crossed, his presence more familiar than formal. There was no talk of business, just a question about how Tyler was holding up, followed by a comment about how the company felt different lately. The conversation drifted slowly and deliberately from corporate topics to more personal territory, backgrounds, upbringing, the subtle cost of ambition. What struck Tyler most wasn't what was said, but what remained implied. The pauses. The way Gregory listened, not with the efficiency of a boss, but with the attentiveness of someone searching for understanding. Tyler, guarded by habit, offered carefully chosen insights. Never lies, but rarely the whole truth. As the conversation neared its end, Gregory didn't move to leave. He stayed standing there, silent again, eyes searching Tyler's face as if waiting for a cue. But Tyler gave none. He had promised himself to maintain control, not just over his career, but over this dynamic too. As much as he wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged for all that he was, including the parts of him he had kept closeted, he refused to be consumed by someone else's silence, especially not when that silence could be weaponized. When Gregory finally turned to go, he said nothing more. The door clicked shut behind him, but Tyler sat frozen for several minutes afterward, grappling with a knot forming in his chest. It wasn't about attraction, not really. It was about boundaries, and how easily they could vanish when power and attention collided in quiet corners. The following week, Tyler submitted a proposal that directly challenged one of the firm's long-standing strategies. It was bold, data-driven, and meticulously argued. He knew it would ruffle feathers, but he also knew Gregory would see the risk for what it was, a declaration. Tyler wasn't here to orbit someone else's influence. He was building his own gravity. The response was swift. Gregory called him into his office the morning after the board preview. No preamble, no performance reviews, just an approving nod and a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "You've made yourself impossible to overlook," Gregory said at last, before handing Tyler an envelope, an official offer letter, detailing his promotion to director of strategy. "No handshake, no congratulations, just recognition." Tyler took the envelope and left the office in silence, heart pounding not from triumph, but from a storm of contradiction. He had wanted this role, had worked for it, and now he had it. But the cost, the context, the game behind the reward left him uneasy. Was this merit, or was he still playing by someone else's rules? Later that night, he sat in his apartment, the offer letter untouched on the table. The city lights flickered through the blinds like a silent audience. He wasn't just climbing a ladder anymore. He was rewriting what the ladder even looked like. And for the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, if visibility came at the price of himself, was it truly worth it? The days following Tyler's promotion passed in a blur of new meetings, responsibilities, and subtle shifts in tone. People who once ignored his presence now sought his opinion. His inbox tripled in volume. His voice, once a suggestion in the back of the room, now anchored discussions in boardrooms and review sessions. But with this newfound authority came something less tangible, an uncomfortable scrutiny. Some of it was expected. Moving up in the ranks always came with pressure. But Tyler could feel something sharper beneath it. Whispers that never quite reached his ears. Sideways glances exchanged when he entered a room. Compliments that felt like setups. Impressive move, they'd say, followed by a pause that left too much unsaid. He wasn't naive. People talked, and Gregory's quiet endorsement, the unspoken bond between them, had been noticed. There was no scandal, no evidence, nothing actionable. But in a corporate ecosystem built on perception, whispers could erode foundations faster than facts. Tyler started staying later at the office, not for Gregory, but for the silence. The quiet hours helped him think, helped him rebuild his inner walls. He buried himself in data models, long-term projections, and cultural initiatives. Anything that could re-anchor his reputation and results, not rumor. Despite the noise around him, Gregory kept his distance. No late-night check-ins, no office visits. Their exchanges became clinical, bound by the safety of company agendas and performance reports. Still, every interaction held a charge, like the air before a storm. Tyler tried to convince himself that it was better this way. Professional, clean, but something inside him felt suspended, like a thread had been pulled but never tied off. And in that ambiguity, he began questioning everything. Not just his role, but his motivation, his choices, even his sense of identity. He had spent so long shaping himself into someone capable, worthy, invulnerable. But in doing so, he had hidden entire pieces of who he was. His history, his desires, his fears, not just from the world, but from himself. One evening, Tyler received an email from the internal HR communications team. They were preparing a diversity feature on company leaders and invited him to share his story as an openly gay executive. The message was polite, enthusiastic even, but it landed with a weight he wasn't prepared for. He stared at the screen for a long time. There was nothing malicious in the offer. In fact, it was the kind of visibility he used to dream of. But now that it was real, it felt more like exposure than empowerment. Not because he was ashamed, but because he wasn't sure who controlled the narrative anymore. Was this acknowledgement of progress, or another form of performance? He drafted a response and deleted it twice before finally settling on something measured. Grateful for the opportunity, but not ready to participate. Not yet. The next day, Gregory asked to see him. The meeting was brief. Updates on the rebrand. A few metrics. Tyler paused in the doorway. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't even advice. It was a warning. Back at his desk, he let the words settle. He thought about the HR email, the look on people's faces when he walked by, the version of him that everyone seemed to be building in their minds, some combination of merit, proximity, and speculation. He had fought to be seen, but now he wasn't sure if what people saw was real. That weekend, Tyler didn't work. He didn't answer emails. He didn't rehearse presentations. Instead, he went for a walk along the waterfront, letting the city blur into reflections and wind. For the first time in months, he felt untethered, not lost but open. The climb had consumed so much of his energy. But maybe visibility wasn't just about rising. Maybe it was also about staying grounded, about reclaiming his story before it was rewritten without him. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. He had already arrived. The next move, if there was one, would be entirely his. Monday came with its usual rush. Deadlines, reports, meetings stacked back to back. But Tyler walked through the office with a different rhythm. There was still the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, the eyes, the unspoken expectations. Yet for the first time, he didn't feel like he was shrinking beneath them. He wasn't hiding behind productivity or overachievement anymore. He was simply there. He had spent so long viewing visibility as a threat, a magnifying glass that exposed him to criticism, envy, even danger. But visibility could also be a mirror if you were brave enough to look closely. And now, Tyler was ready to see. When he entered the boardroom that morning, something small had changed. He no longer scanned the room to decode glances. He wasn't chasing approval. He didn't need to validate his presence with overpreparedness. He sat. He listened. He spoke, measured, confident, clear. After the meeting, Gregory pulled him aside. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of the vending machine and distant voices from other floors. "I saw the final draft of your internal leadership profile," Gregory said. "HR went ahead and included you in the piece anyway." Tyler tensed. "I didn't agree to that." They used publicly available quotes, kept it brief. No labels. Just a note about your work and recent projects. Gregory's voice was neutral, but his eyes searched Tyler's. "You're in a position now where silence also speaks." Tyler exhaled slowly. It wasn't betrayal. Not really. But it reminded him of how narratives take shape, often without consent. That night, he reread the profile. It was clean, factual, respectful. But it danced around everything that mattered. His journey, his identity, his struggle to exist in a space that hadn't always felt safe. He saw his achievements listed like ingredients, but none of the story behind them. None of the weight. None of the truth. He closed his laptop and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of others filling in the blanks for him. Tired of tiptoeing around who he was. And then, not suddenly, but with the steady quiet of something long overdue, he made a decision. The next morning, he asked HR if he could submit an addendum to his profile. A short statement. Personal. Clear. His own words. It wasn't dramatic. No confessions, no cruzades. Just a simple reflection on leadership and identity. How it feels to navigate a space where you are both welcomed and watched. How growth isn't just about climbing. It's about shedding what no longer serves you. Fear, shame, silence. He sent it without rereading. The response was immediate. A thank you from HR. A quiet email from The young man smiled back, hesitant, surprised. Tyler recognized that expression. It was the look of someone who wasn't sure if they were allowed to belong. And in that moment, Tyler realized he had become something more than a leader. He had become a landmark, not because of his title, but because he had chosen to be seen. He would never know all the conversations that happened behind closed doors, the speculations, the judgments, the misinterpretations. But that didn't matter anymore. He had spent years fighting to be invisible in the name of survival. Now, he was choosing visibility in the name of something greater. Legacy, not the kind built on power or metrics, but the quiet kind, the kind that lets others breathe a little easier, dream a little louder, speak a little sooner. In the end, Tyler didn't change the company overnight. He didn't need to. He had changed the only thing he truly could, himself. And sometimes that was enough to change everything.